I say now we go to work, we try to understand each other, and the first thing for understanding each other, we should know something more about this cost action, underground for value. So I would like, first of all, to, not all of you know the underground built heritage. So here you can find a sort of easy classification from heritage. And I will not repeat too much because we would like to go on the real topics. But this is, let's say, one of our materials. We have to define what we mean for this heritage. As you can see, is not something virtual. Sometimes it could be not accessible, but it should be something physical with a certain kind of contribution of the human kind. And it could be architecture, but also it could be just like a landscape, just like mining landscape, or the results of the mining, as in this region, for example. So we started more than 2 years ago with this challenge. So this underground built heritage could be a resource for who? For the communities. So another material of our studies is the community. So from one side, we have resources, heritage resources. On the other side, we have living people that have normal daily needs. And if this community is able to identify himself with the heritage, we believe that he can protect it. But if he doesn't identify with the heritage, we will never protect it. It's not his own, let's say, goal. For doing this, we decided to establish a network in order that this expert network could interact with local communities, could disseminate innovative thinking. And the action is active from May 2019. The first meeting was in Ancona. And it will finish not anymore to April 2023, but we are going to extend until end of October 2023. At the moment, we have 35 countries, 179 members. We want also to increase the members as much as possible. And we have 5 working groups, but then I will explain you how it works. Because as I told you, first of all, we have these materials. The materials are the case studies. So we have communities, we have legislation, we have technology, we have tools, but first of all, we have this underground built heritage. We have caves, hypogeous churches, we have catacombs, we have infrastructure, we have many other things. So first of all, we have this working group that they prepare materials for tools, elements for communities. Then we have 4 case studies per year. And each case study is analyzed, assessed, and some of us goes on site and work with the community in order to create a new experiment. We call it a living lab. So they start meeting, discussing, but we are going to see how it will work. And this is one of my first elements of discussion. So how we link the local community with the heritage, and how we link the global community, so the expert with local community, and how all this is linked to competencies, to increase competencies in order to, at the end, to build new meanings, new identities, or let's say reaffirm identities. All this is basically the core of our action. And then how do we learn from this? Biggest part of the learning, it happens here in the training school, where we have lectures, but also we have the people who went on site. They will tell you what happened on site, the problems on site, and they are your tutors. So in the afternoon, they will stay with you, and you will work with them in order to create your vision, your, let's say, options for building the meaning. It's clear that it's not the living lab, because you are not dealing with the real community, but you are starting to create options, ideas for the community. The community can use your options, your ideas, in order to build its own, let's say, meaning. As you can see, materials, competencies, and meanings will go all along this annual activity. And at the moment, we have 8 case studies. In the beginning, we were thinking, and also we learn and we change. In the beginning, we were thinking, okay, every year we have 4 case studies, they start and they end. But then we see that nothing ends in 1 year. The long story of pandemics teach us that actions needs more time. So what we are simply increasing the number of case studies every year, until we will find at least a good solution or a failure. Nobody knows. So we work at the moment with these 8 case studies, but you will deal with 4 case studies, and each research group will deal with 1. Then we go to the living lab. What is a living lab? It's a place more or less protected, because you have all the actors put together for creating not an integrated big, let's say, project, but a small practice in order to experiment, if it's possible, working together at the level of community with this kind of heritage. And one side is we want to document this in order to foster sustainability, and we would like to encourage new forms of collaboration among them. You see there are some pictures of the first time when our living labs were absolutely public, there were no masks, and now, okay, the picture that we have for this year, they are all with masks. And okay, you will see in the presentation of after me, they were going to present you the case studies, and you will see people at distance with masks, but they were very brave, because they went on site during pandemics, risking to have 14 days of quarantine and not doing the job. And then we arrived to the focal point. It's the training school. It was the training school of Naples, as you can see, where we tried to say what we do, and also we discussed with you in order to change our mind or to improve our learning process. So it's very interactive. Don't hesitate to ask for questions. And also we decided now for the award in procedures, they were not going to create an expert jury, but everybody will vote through a smartphone app. And then we will tell you how to do. So you will evaluate and vote for also the others participating in this award. We have 6 awards, but then it's another story. And then we go. From let's say, the materials point of view, let's discuss from the first element. The only thing that can be connected to us in terms of, let's say, or institutional tool is the recommendation of the historic urban landscape, HUL. That was, let's say, settled to balance, basically, as you can read, the relationship between urban and natural environment. So between, okay, the needs of the present and the future generation and the legacy from the past. This is but what the idea under HUL is the same idea that then we have. We want to move from the preservation of the monument, and we want to focus on the other side, on the peak wall, on the human environment. And in this case, we need to find new tools, and we have also to involve as much as possible more stakeholders in the preservation effort. So we have to increase the level of awareness, for example, but also the economic interest in transparent way. They create, I told you, a set of tools, but they were not very defined, because this rule is a soft law. So there is a recommendation to the states, but the states then they can do what they want. basically. So we have knowledge and planning tools, we have civic engagement tools, we have financial tools and regulatory systems. So from our point of view, we are going to analyze all of them for each country, but the center of the most difficult of the tools, the one that is not usually faced by university and scientific groups, is the civic engagement tools. Why? Because basically it's the most unstable one, and it doesn't give too much power to the, let's say, the global community. You have to understand that each of these activities, recommendations are done by global communities, international ones. They want to maintain the control. They consider the objectivity of the value of the heritage. That is very important, and we will listen Shirley and also, Renata also will speak about that later about this important element. But I will focus on the contrary, on the community side. So I will not, so it's basically, I skip this because we have only 20 minutes, but you have the presentation. So on the left side, you have all approach. So what they do? So they are experts, so they go to map resources. So with the map resources, so they went to have meetings with everybody, with people, but not well-defined people. So on what protect and values and attributes, so they do just before. So who is going to participate without any kind of commitment? We don't know. Doesn't matter. For them, it's only to have this kind of, let's say, group of people saying what they think, and then they collect this information. Also, they assess vulnerability, and then they go to institutional level, they integrate inside the urban development framework, they prioritize action, and finally, they support the establishment of partnerships. So at the end, the stakeholders participate, but just only at the end. So the real interest arrives at the end of a process that is not managed by the local community. That is their approach, expert lead. On the contrary, as you can see, if we start just with the local partnership in the beginning, it means that we basically empower community to take decisions by their own. So since beginning, they organize a framework, the community, with experts that they are giving options, helping, so they participate to the process of assessing vulnerability. They help them to reach the consensus on what protect after they have knowledge, and help to give, choose the activities, and then at the end, they integrate all these in a urban development framework, maybe. Or it's only a small project, very isolated. So we need to have a cultural transition. But now, today, everybody, let's say, is used to listen this term that is named transition. So this change process that from one way of doing bring us to become more environmentally friendly, let's say inclusive, connected, anything is transition. In our case, this is a branch of studies. I don't want to go too much in detail, but usually it's better to have a look at the picture. The screen is large. What happens normally? We have a lot of small experiments at local scale in this system. These experiments can have an impact on, let's say, science, policy, technology that are named the regimes. For example, I was speaking about global cultural community. This is a sort of regime. UNESCO, all these, they create this kind of, let's say, recommendation, convention, list. It's a sort of group of people that decide for all. It's a regime. And normally, it's very difficult to change the regime. Let's imagine, for example, about cars, how long it takes to pass from the conventional cars to the electric cars, a long time, because they are regimes that they maintain their interest until the end. So we have markets, we have other elements, part of this regime. And then outside the regime, at the upper scale, we have the landscape, we have our world, our environment, political, social, and economic, that is outside the regimes. So what we do, we try to influence with the small experiments, the regimes, they found their benefit, they absorb it, and then they go up toward the stability. So new regulation, new routines. That happens, and this is the transition. In order to do that, we have several kinds of ways. One is disruptive. You invent something completely disruptive, just like, for example, internet and things like that, and after a while we have new regimes. Or you have an approach that is more strategic. And what we do is a sort of strategic thing, so we try to help people to look on why we do that and how. So we are not telling them what or when and so on. But we can help them in giving them reasons in strategies. And we help people looking at this and with different eyes. So we want to change focal points to communities, and that is not an easy challenge. That's why when I was telling you civic engagement tools are not so developed, because it's not very, let's say, politically correct. So how they should involve these, let's say, actors, let's say, we call them stakeholders, but how they should involve the community. So first of all, who is behind this cross-section of stakeholders? We don't know normally. Each community has its own number of stakeholders. Also, the type of, let's say, heritage demands for different stakeholders. So normally we should define who are the stakeholders in the beginning. And then once we know the stakeholders, we are going to create a strategy for empowering them. So as you can see, we have the second question. And then, okay, I was forgetting. This is the definition done by the UL about civic engagement tools. So I'm only analyzing these, let's say, recommendation. So the third question of this is how these engagement tools can facilitate intercultural dialogue. So what kind of type of dialogue we need to define? And then in order to learn from communities, but also this learning from communities is enough strange. Sometimes is not only, we don't need to learn from communities because sometimes there are communities deciding. So we learn for ourselves, but not for deciding. And that is one of the other, let's say, strange, let's say, aspiration inside this rule. So the first question is how decisions are taken in this way. If we are not going to take the decision, who is going to take the decision? So also the mediation and negotiation is depending on who is going to take the decision. So I am not going to spend time on this, but you have different kinds of stakeholders according always the rule. And you should see that basically public and private stakeholders, they can cooperate through partnership. So they define a sort of tool. We are going then to discuss about the partnership, what means, in which position in participation is the partnership. Then who is behind? Basically, we say one of our materials is the community. On brackets, you see local community, and a collectivity. So we put together two kinds of definition of community. One is a sociological definition, and the other one the territorial one. So from one side is a collectivity of members that they share common territorial areas, identity, and values, but which actively and freely participate to the construction of the specific actions. So if they have no interest to participate, it's not a community. And if they are not let's say, with a certain kind of contiguity in terms of territory, they have no any meaning. So we are not going to have a community in Madagascar for working in China. They are not going to really be part of the process. So also in this case, I would like to skip, but it's very important, the characteristics of our communities. So they are based on identity, reciprocity, and trust. And they are fundamental in order to create a community, because sometimes we have not yet a community. We have a proto-community. We have some people that could become a community if put together in a sort of, let's say, experiment. They can find each other. We did very little scale also at the neighborhood level, because you can create also a street community. Sometimes we did, for example, in our case in Ghent, where we create a system in the city to use the street for different usage, closing the street to the traffic, and let's say the created community, they could do 1 month using the street for markets, for volleyball, other things like that. And we reprogram the traffic in order not creating problems to the city. But okay, so how to empower the community? That is enough complicated. Basically, because we have to define who are the community, with the community first of all, and we did, and it's an action-oriented. As I told you, you need to have an action. So the community is not empowered for anything, but they should have a target, a goal. They should use basically their power and their participation to achieve an objective. That could be also the identity itself. And it's based, so I give you, this is a simple taxonomy, so I will try to go through. But basically, when we discuss about power, we have 2 kinds of power, you must understand. So I don't want to give too much information, but we have power on people. But when we discuss about the power of the empowerment, that is just an typology, we are speaking power with. So a power that characterized by collaboration, sharing, and mutuality. So we are not creating the power of somebody over the others. And that is very important in order to understand also the second point that is also in my title, alternative development. Basically, we have a certain kind of problem in our society, as you know, because we have let's say, life space is not overlapping with the global economic space. So, and the contrast between this global economic space and the life space is the conflicting area. And in order to reduce the risk that the state and corporate economy basically decide, you need to increase, let's say, political communities and civil society. So our empowerment is a term, so that's I have really to run, is really how to increase the level of, let's say, involvement of civil society and political community in the decision making. So we arrived to the level of participation, but this is a famous picture. I'm only using very famous picture. This is the ladder of Arnstein ladder of citizen participation. It gives you the different level. As you can see, there is a part that is non-participation, basically the manipulation, that is they normally used when we say participation. So what they do, they prepare the decisions, and then they present the decision in public, and they have a nice chat. Very good, but not helpful to anybody. It's not influencing any kind of decisioning. Then there is the second part that is the talkerism, when what they do normally, they inform you during the process, good, but you cannot have a discussion, or they consult you, so you can say something, they can say yes, no, but thanks you for at least having participated, or application, because when people are very conflicting, they can also go to any kind of system. This is typical for the Netherlands. System for placating. We create a nice center with the kids telling how nice the project is and so on. These are tokenism, because we are not really taking decision. It's not the community takes decision. So we have then 3 levels of citizen power. And the first level is the partnership. And that's one normally that is considered the maximum level that you can achieve in participation. The other 2 is really the delegate power, so the citizen have power delegated by the state. And even more complicated is have the total citizen control. They do the case by themselves, the state doesn't have any role. But so we were much more simple, so we reduced this scale in 5 points. So we consider not interesting anymore speaking about manipulation. We gave information, consultation, cooperation, partnering, empowering. As you can see, the partnering is still not the last, but at least is something that is a collaboration with stakeholders. But okay, so dialogue, I will skip. So we can discuss during the meetings about the dialogue. But, let's see, one of the main problems is the governance system behind the decisions are taken. Normally, we have, let's say, 2 types of governance. So let's say always multi-level. One with already predefined actors. The actors are well predefined and they are not overlapping. So we know the actors, so we know it's a club. They take the decisions. It's a number, it's easy, and they give a result. Normally, it's the state that leads this. And the second one, when the actors are not designed previously, but they can also be overlapping, creating conflict, and they are unexpected. And this is the second one is a circular, let's say. So to make the civic engagement tools, we should find a tool that helps to manage circular, basically, governance systems. They are the most interesting, and they can create innovation. The other ones are already predefined. So the decisions are taken, that is complicated. Let's say, we need to create a framework. And I would like then to stress this. We need to create a certain kind of framework in order to support nonlinear process. And that is our target in this Underground for Value. So our initiatives, our living labs, normally are not the success stories. They are not going to success stories, or not yet. They have problems. Also in the success stories, we have conflicts. So the conflicts are the most interesting for us. So if anything goes well, it's not a case study for us. Also, because what we are going to analyze is when in this conflict area, how we can help people to take, let's say, to have a different approach. We can open the mind to different options, and we can help them to think by themselves and to change, let's say, the meaning. So normally, also our approach with our network is also to we try to put together the global community with the local community. And encouraging people at the local level to be creative. So if I'm not coming here to give you solutions, but only helping you to find and define options, alternatives, this is my success. And then I will participate, maybe because I love the place, maybe I will participate in your construction of the solution, but it's not the architect that goes on site and gives to everybody the solution. So it's not empowering anybody in this way. And okay, in order to be very practical, we started from 2 different approaches. One was process-oriented, that is a strategic stakeholder dialogue, and the other one is goal-oriented. That is the transition management, according to what I said. Basically, they start with niche, that they have a specific goal, and you arrive then to change the environment. We can put all together in terms of practice, because what we really mean to do is to find links between these materials and competencies and to arrive to meanings. And this is exactly what Giddens consider as a social practice. So, and in this sense of practice, okay, I would like to skip this one, but we can discuss on this, but we have not so much time. I would like to arrive to the last minute. Yeah, but in order to have question, at least I have to arrive to the final point. Okay, so I told you process-oriented, goal-oriented, but we are practice-oriented. So success, failure, they are all part of our learning. So we learn also from difficult stories what doesn't work. When we have practice-oriented, the first thing very important, and it's difficult to understand from the institutions, is they are not outside of the process, controlling the process, but they are part of the process. So they are part, they have no control of the process. And this is the main point in, so we have radical steps. We deal for social innovation. It's the community that lead normally, and I would like to go then to the end. We have a community that also can decide, to do a certain kind of project. It's not the municipality necessarily, can be also an association or can be also a single, an individual that has an idea, he wants to use a special kind of heritage and he wants to aggregate people around. Doesn't matter. So normally the questions are who can initiate a process, and I already told you everybody, basically, is not a significance, and who is going to facilitate the process then? That is, so normally there are institutions intermediate, there is not the public, it could be a research center, an university, or any kind of intermediate institution. There cannot be economic actors, they can't be only the public. Otherwise, it will be top-down oriented and will not work. Or it will work maybe to create a museum, maybe to create a park because it's easier, but I don't think that they will integrate this museum and a park in a real community process. And okay, we create a number of building blocks, and there are 8, and you will see in the presentation. I think I suggest you then that you have a read of the presentation because it's full of information about also resources that we can use in these afternoons in order to work on this. So in order to be, this is the, okay, I know. Okay, so I will show you fastly. There are 8. It is from the analysis, creating, finding the stakeholders, establishing the living lab. Then we have the operational phase, so deepening the knowledge, creating the options, basically, define technologies, define models, business models, and then having choices and experimenting, and finally telling the story. So I was running, but please, questions, and then we can go back to the presentation if you have questions that are related to the presentation. You had it.
So, yes, now it's better. I was thinking for these case studies that we are working on, is it better to work on cycles? How have you thought about it? Or is it more like, okay, you start one case study this year and then you end this year and then you try to see if there is any response? Is there any feedback in the bigger loop? That's my question.
So you say that normally we have 4 case studies per year.
Yes.
We start them, but we don't know when they finish. Also, when we start a case study, the case studies has never the same level of maturity. Maybe they've already done a lot of interesting activities, there is something that is missing. As I show you, the blocks are, let's say, circular. You can start also from the last block, only telling the story, maybe. Then you go back. So it's not flexible, the process. It's not a linear process that I start from the construction of the ambitions, and I want to arrive to tell the story. Sometimes you enter in the middle of a process.
I hear you. So it really depends also on the stakeholders and what they've already played
Yes.
in the game.
Or something that has never started, and there is somebody that participates to our meetings. Yeah, but I have a place that could be very interesting. Let's start from zero. Also for searching the community. Maybe we have no community, not yet. So the situation is really variable, and that's the good thing, because we can experiment in different stage the development of this, let's say, valorization of the underground built heritage.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other question from the floor?
That's difficult.
So we are keeping the schedule.
Okay.
Giuseppe, would you like to give some other brief guideline before I finish your presentation? Because we still have 4 minutes in your turn.
I have 4 minutes, so I can go just in detail.
But I will really appreciate if we keep the schedule, okay?
No, at least I can give you much more information about the circular process that we were, this one, only this one. So that is now a redrafting of what is on the book, because you received the handbook, so all my presentation is more or less related to what is written in my chapter. But here, as you can see, you have 4 stages. We have a preliminary stage. That is the stage when you are, let's say, searching for the ambition, searching for the potential, and so on. Also searching for the first promoters. You create the team, for example, too. Then you have the startup, where you create something that is stable for running let's say, the niche, the living lab. And then you have a big operational phase. And finally, this operational phase can be evaluated, monitored, and also told. And this is the reflexive phase. When we go to the searchlight, what we have to define, first of all, the scope of the living lab. Who is going to be the promoter, the initiator of the idea? So it can be a university, also can be a group of people, a development agency. Doesn't matter. Somebody on the territory that has a certain kind of connection with the heritage. So we define first the scope of the living lab, and we define the ecological landscape on the back, what we are going to deal with. And we create a certain kind of scenarios. So the first group should be very committed. We cannot have people not really dealing with. So it's not, at the moment, the first proposal should be done by people, local people with knowledge, but they know the case. And then we organize the team with the right spirit. So we are not going to have a team with conflict inside in the beginning, at least not yet. And so we need to share the ambitions. Some resources are there you can click, and you can find interesting resources for doing this. I said some of these resources, but in the future we will have a toolbox with many other resources. So the idea is to help communities, so people to start things here with resources. And then we are going to, once we have the ambition, we know what we want, we can go to search the map the stakeholders and to engage them. So interviews, meetings, and so on, other, let's say, resources are there. And we create a first agenda. And then we establish the living lab. That is the easiest thing, as you can say, long list. We start then to work on why and how. Done. Okay. So the rest will be for the next time. But okay, we are working on this. So